Hey everybody, welcome to lecture 3. Here we go. So you notice this one is a little bit more convoluted, lots and lots of information. Like I stated in an earlier lecture, I believe, that book was about approximately over 500 pages long. I personally enjoyed it thoroughly, and that was just an excerpt because about half of the book discusses and breaks this down regarding the ideological religious paintings of the 15th century European. And of course, it would be unfair to compare 21st century Christianity to 15th century Christianity, though I believe there's still pockets in and around the world that I believe still carry this particular perspective. I mean, the belief system in itself holds this premise that that things have to be set up in some way for to be able to welcome a Messiah back. I believe also the Muslim religion holds at least some part of that religion. Don't quote me on this. Has also a messianic type of belief system where a Mahdi, I believe they call him, is a type of Messiah that's also supposed to come back. Anyways, let's get back to the reading a little bit. So, in my lecture summary, I summarized the differences between ethnocentrism and racism. Now, racism is a recent phenomenon. If as far as human beings interacting in that part of the world, and I'm talking about Europe, Southern Europe particularly, the Middle East, and Northern Africa. So you have these human beings with very different phenotypes, right? Different, the way they look with with the type of hair, facial features, eye shape, lips, not. I mean, things that just differentiate them, right? A Northern European from Scandinavia as opposed to a sub-Saharan African, huge same human being, share the same genes, genotype, phenotypes are different, manifested very differently. Now, the difference between ethnocentrism and racism is that ethnocentrism is something that's followed us along as tribal people, right? So we adjust to our environment, and all of a sudden we become masters within that particular environment, whether we're in the middle of the Amazon, in the middle of the sub-Saharan desert or Saharan desert, or up in the Tibetan plateaus, right? We human beings adapt pretty well to particular environments, and we get this notion, this confident notion that our cultural group, our tribal group, our national group has a perception that helps it navigate successfully. Of course, if an outsider of the cultural group, let's say an Amazonian, enters an Andean region, an Andes region, and she navigates it clumsily, we automatically assume that these folks are out of their out of their league, or at least out of our league, right? When it comes to them coming into our region. But the same thing they could say about us when we're navigating the Amazon jungle. So ethnocentrism has a lot more to do with how each group adapts to its environment, and then they get this perception and bias of their particular group being, I don't want to say superior, but definitely having advantages of sorts. Now, of course, that particular perspective can turn into a violent, coercive um, characteristic, meaning that you could go around like the Romans did. The Romans didn't go around and pick on people because they were Northern European white, or they go into no, into Egypt and attack those people because they looked a certain way. No, it was primarily, hey, my culture is superior to your culture. That's ethnocentrism. It has more of a cultural component, not a racial one. The racial one is a construction of sorts. It's more recent. Once the Europeans went out into the world and they ran into all these different people, and I'm talking about Western Europeans primarily. So we're talking about let's see, English, Spanish, French, um, uh, and other primarily Western Europeans, Germans, when they go out to the world, they've been in a relatively isolated group for the most part. They're aware of these scary Huns who are coming from the east, the Mongols in this case, Huns and Mongols, same thing. They're aware of this Muslim, Islam, Middle Eastern type of folks. So they've been contending with these folks for a long time. So they're scared and they sort of isolate, right? And but they haven't constructed this notion of, my race superior to your race. That's something very new, at least in human history in the last 500 years. And so it wouldn't really take strong hold until we this Western Europeans start colonizing parts of South, Central, and North America, and this is where racism and the myths behind it begin to constructed. So, as also in my lecture notes, I take notice that different ethnic groups have created mythical stories to justify why they're just the coolest group on the block. Okay, the Jewish people have this notion of being the chosen people, right? Their God chose them as opposed to any other group. Okay, that's part of their myths, that part of their belief system. The Aztecs also uh, followed a priest shaman, Meshi, who had this effigy of this what the Westerners called the god of war, Huitzilopochtli. Of course, I don't want to go down that tangent. But they carried this effigy and they were following that priest shaman and this effigy of Huitzilopochtli down to the promised land. Of course, when they got there, it wasn't a promised land. They had to kind of build islands to construct a promised land. We also have the English during the Spanish, as pointed out by Standard. Their Christianity, they within it they constructed this myth, and to this day you'll find groups within the World Wide Web, including Facebook groups, who you can see them rewriting Spanish history to make it look like Spain, just was the first modern Western European empire who began to introduce the world into to civilize the world, primarily the Americas, and moved on to the Caribbean, moved on to the East Pacific with the Philippines and other places they invaded and colonized. Then, of course, the English took a turn at it during the 1800s and early 1900s, and now it's us. Now we construct our own myths as to why we're the most powerful. I mean, the the finishing statement for a lot of politicians, including our president, is "God bless the United States of America." So what does that imply? Again, a belief system, an ideological system to justify, like, the reason we're the most powerful is because God has been blessing us this whole time. As they spread westward, European Americans, as they made their way, there was this justification created called the manifest destiny. And eventually, as they spread their power, their political influence, economic influence across the region, including taking half of Mexico's territory, moving on to Mexico, moving on to the Caribbean, there was always an ideological justification that's just the Anglo American is just the big boys on the block. We're just good at stuff. So a lot of groups do this. It happens that right now this particular group has embraced white supremacy, as you can see through Standard. All throughout, their leaders are presidents. They're always invoking the superiority of their culture and how they're justifying and eliminating groups of people if they get in the way. I mean, you either join us or get eliminated. Okay, so I kind of want to just to leave it at that because we're hitting on the 10 minutes here. Read over carefully over my lecture notes, and the homework assignment is I want to say it's a little challenging, but I want you to think about this. So the outline has approximately about 40 different points that I think you should pay attention in the reading on Standard, and then I have a video that's approximately it's about 50 minutes long. It's an hour and 20, but half of it is questions Or at least a third of it is question and answer at the end. So just watch the lecture by Mr. Parenti. I heard him when I was in college and read his book, Empire. Anyway, so do that. And I also, the last thing I want to mention is that next week it's going to be our first attempt at hosting a Google Hangout classroom setup. So what I want to do is I want to kind of host half of the class one day on Tuesday and the other half on Thursday. That way we don't have like 14 people and people just trying to ask questions. So I want to kind of have a control group, maybe of 7 students on one on Tuesday and then 7 students on Thursday. So I'll send you more instructions on that here in the next couple of days. Thanks.